Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our webinar tonight, which is on how to reverse type 2 diabetes in 16 weeks. So for any of you who aren't familiar with our work, the company is ReadyCare. ReadyCare Control is our core product, which is a type 2 program for reversing type 2 diabetes. My name is Andy Shepherd. I am the clinic lead for the company, or as my wife likes to say, chief nerd or super nerd. So I'm the health scientist and behind all the data and publications that I'll be talking about this evening. This lady in the photo, guys, is Maria. That's her daughter, Sadie. Sadie, of course, loved her mom like any other daughter. 3 weeks after this photo was taken, Maria died at 39 years of age from complications from an entirely preventable and reversible condition, and that condition is type 2 diabetes. There's 1.5 billion people like Maria. I mean, at really, really high risk of dying from things like blood pressure, high cholesterol, type 2 diabetes, things that, you know, we don't get hit with until it's too late. And it's a shame, and this is the reason I set my alarm at crazy o'clock in the morning and get up and research till the minute I'm going to bed, because I'm absolutely unbelievably passionate, and we are as a company, about this sort of stuff. I mean, these deaths are happening and it's just needless, completely needless. Now, sometimes when I talk to patients, they say to me, you know, but I'm on medication, and it's both frustrating and it kind of inspiring to hear at the same time, if that makes sense. When patients say to me, I'd say, have you got high blood pressure? And they'd say, well, yeah, I do. Well, I'm on medication for it. And I feel like saying, well, you're on the medication for a reason. You have a blood pressure issue. Taking the medication addresses the symptoms. So what do I mean by that? I mean that if your blood pressure goes up to 160/100 and then it goes back down to 120/80 on medication, the thing that's causing the high blood pressure is going to cause other problems. And the thing that causes type 2 also causes other problems. There's the reason that people with type 2 diabetes almost always end up with high blood pressure, eventually high cholesterol, fatty liver, sometimes sleep apnea, and other times in females, PCOS. They all have the same root cause. And actually many cancers are rooted in PCOS as well. 13 of the leading 15 most fatal cancers are called hormone-positive cancers. Things like colorectal cancers, breast cancer, or the other ones, there's loads of them. Basically anything to do with hormones will be caused by insulin resistance as well. The same thing that causes diabetes. And if you look at the literature, if you have diabetes, you're much more likely to get cancer. And that's not a coincidence. It's not, you know, it's not that diabetes itself causes cancer. It's that the same thing that caused diabetes, the insulin resistance, and insulin resistance, by the way, I always say it without explaining it, is basically just high levels of insulin in the body from your pancreas being a bit tired, essentially, from carbohydrates and sugar. So type 2 diabetes is kind of a more extreme insulin resistance, albeit one that's very easy to reverse. High blood pressure is caused by insulin resistance, fatty liver, sleep apnea, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, dementia. They're all insulin resistance that travels to the brain. So it's becoming more and more obvious that insulin resistance is at the root cause of almost every chronic condition that we suffer from in the Western world that we don't see in remote tribes around the world. So this is both good and bad news, guys, because what it means is it's bad news in the sense that you get all those conditions coexisting together. And a patient of mine said to me once, he said, I've always considered myself to be relatively healthy. Like I'm not, you know, not taking the mickey and just eating all around me. And yet I ended up with high cholesterol, high blood pressure, overweight, sleep apnea, and I ended up getting cancer. And I said to him, well, that's not because you were taking the mickey with your diet. Your diet might have been pretty okay. Type 2 diabetes and insulin resistance is not a patient's fault, categorically. I always say this in my seminars because I want people to know. It happens, and all insulin resistant conditions happen when you get your environment that crosses over with your genetic predisposition for disease. So what a lot of people with type 2 and high blood pressure would say to me is, I'll say, you know, is there any type 2 in the family? And almost always they'll say, well, there's either type 2 on my mother's side, or my dad had a stroke or a heart attack, or there's something to do with heart disease or diabetes, which are essentially different manifestations of the same thing on one or both sides, almost exclusively. It's pretty rare that someone says to me, no stroke, no heart attack, and no diabetes on either side of my family, because there is a big genetic component to it. So it's not about fault, and the great news is it can absolutely be reversed. So I always make the point, and it might sound a bit controversial, but look, you know, we need to be straight about these things. Is it really healthcare if you're injecting yourself with insulin or taking diabetes medications when your blood sugar levels go high because you're eating carbohydrates? Or is it symptom management? Is it sickness management? Because nobody has ever in the history of medication gone on medications for diabetes and gone, that's it, my diabetes is cured, it's reversed. It doesn't happen. So the goal of medications is to control your blood sugar levels, to drop them down 10 or 20%. Never is it stated anywhere in the literature that the goal is to put the diabetes into remission like we do with diet. So I make the point that it's not really healthcare, it's more sickness management. Same thing with blood pressure. If you don't try to get to the root cause of it and you just throw medications at it, and the blood pressure stays high every time you come off the medications, that's sickness management. It's symptom management as opposed to true healthcare. So the point I'm making here is that drug therapy doesn't address the root cause. So if you're eating a bowl of cornflakes, for example, and poor cornflakes, I give them an awful bashing. If you eat a bowl of cornflakes, you'll end up with about 20 to 21 spoons of sugar in your blood. The same thing goes for Cocoa Pops, muesli, shredded wheat, Weetabix, all of those. Excuse me, I turned my mic off for a second, but my two little snotty children came in. I have a 4 and a 5-year-old downstairs, and they're after dragging in a head cold from school last week. So they're home this week and they're after passing the bug around. So excuse me. So drug therapy doesn't address the root cause, and the root cause of high levels of sugar in the blood and high insulin levels that lead to type 2 diabetes is refined carbohydrate. Not too much calories, not lack of exercise. Type 2 diabetes is best described as, to really simplify it, carbohydrate allergy. Yet we tell patients, continue to eat your carbohydrates and then take medication when your blood sugars go high. So the expectation is that you keep eating all these carbs that we know we're intolerant to and allergic to, and your blood sugars go high, which makes the situation worse. It's kind of a vicious cycle. This is just a little bit about what we do. So we're trusted by doctors and specialists. We have a ton of doctors in Ireland and the UK refer their patients into us, about 140, 150 corporate clients, and we have an agreement with a large pharmacy chain as well, which is Lloyd's Pharmacy. So we're kind of, we're in this game about 7 years in reversing diabetes and treating metabolic health. When I say metabolic health, I'm just referring to things like high cholesterol, or more specifically dyslipidemia, hypertension, which is high blood pressure, weight gain, obesity, all those sorts of things. And they all have that commonality, as we're talking about there a while ago. They're caused by high levels of insulin in the blood. So high insulin from a high carb diet leads to type 2 diabetes, weight gain, weight around the midsection, inability to lose weight, dysregulation of your energy levels, high triglycerides, low HDL, which is called dyslipidemia or high cholesterol, sleep apnea, PCOS, Alzheimer's, many other things. So it's the same one root cause at the root of those. And sometimes when I'm on the phone to people and doing consultations or a new patient is starting with me, like to do every day or two, I sometimes get excited when someone says to me, they say, actually, of all of the above. I've high blood pressure, I've high cholesterol, I've weight around the midsection of type 2 diabetes. And I said, brilliant. And I said, the reason I say brilliant, it sounds odd, like an odd reaction, is because I know how to reverse all those conditions at the same time. I know how to make them all dramatically better and get you off medication. This is for anyone who says, oh, I don't know if type 2 can be reversed. My doctor hasn't seen the literature and thinks that maybe it can't be reversed. Well, actually, this is the International Scholar Award awarded to us by the American Heart Association for our work on diabetes in primary care in 2020. So if anyone's doctor is saying, or nurse is saying, I don't know, can type 2 be reversed? I would say to that health professional, I wonder, why is it that the Paul Dudley White International Scholar Award was awarded to the researchers in Readycare for their work on diabetes, and that's why. And I'm not being funny, but just to, you know, because your doctor hasn't heard of it doesn't mean that it's not true. We also won the National Clinical Pharmacy Congress Award for Excellence in General Practice. They never make it easy. It's always a really long title. For our work in type 2 diabetes and metabolic health, like blood pressure, weight loss, all that sort of stuff. That was just a couple of weeks ago, actually. So I just want to explain before I go into our results and you know, the sort of food choices that we should make for diabetes, what HbA1c is. It's feedback I often get from patients, and you know what? It's kind of upsetting when I hear it. Is patients will say to me, do you know what? Nobody has ever explained to me before what HbA1c is. Nobody has ever explained what blood glucose is, and nobody has ever explained what type 2 diabetes is and what I can do about it. I was just told, you have it, here's your medication, see you in 6 months to a year. And that's the kind of traditional pharmacological treatment of diabetes is, don't worry about your diet. In fact, don't even check your blood sugars during the day, just check them once a morning every now and again. And or some people will be told don't even check them, which is madness. I just don't understand it. So I just want to explain and give you a bit of a backdrop as to what I mean when I say HbA1c and blood glucose. So HbA1c is, it's a 120-day average of your blood sugar levels. So sometimes people say to me, oh, my blood sugar level is 65, and that's not. That's usually your HbA1c. Your HbA1c, if it's above 48, you're diabetic. If it's below 48, you're not. That's how simple classification of diabetes is. The clinical diagnosis of reversing diabetes or putting your diabetes into remission, which we see every day of the week with patients, is a HbA1c of lower than 48 while off medications. So we often have to refer patients back into their doctors to go off medications. So HbA1c is a 120-day average of, so what HbA1c is, it stands for hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is a binding protein that glucose, which is sugar, attaches to, and then when the sugar dies after a couple of hours, the level of hemoglobin will tell you how much sugar has passed through in the last 120 days. So it's kind of a proxy or a side marker for blood sugar control. Blood sugar, on the other hand, is how much sugar is in your blood right now. So if I do 2 readings 10 minutes apart, one is now and the next one is after a bottle of Lucozade, I could be diabetic in one and I could be perfect in the other. So it's not really a great indication of your overall blood sugar control because it fluctuates quite a bit. So if you're less than 42 in HbA1c, that's normal. If you're 42 to 48, that's pre-diabetes. And I always make the argument that we should call pre-diabetes diabetes happening, because I have seen hundreds and hundreds of patients who came from the doctor and said, my doctor says I'm just borderline, so I'm grand and keep an eye on it. And that's kind of like saying your engine is chugging, keep an eye on it and I'll see you next year. If you do nothing about it, that engine is going to fail. And it's the same thing with the pancreas. If your pancreas is struggling, your blood sugars are trending very high, you're going to be diabetic. It's not, pre-diabetes never undoes itself accidentally or just by chance. It's going to become diabetes. So I always think we should call it diabetes in situ or diabetes happening. And that would make people more aware of what it is. If it's higher than 48, then you're diabetic. And the lower the number, the closer it is to 48, the better your glycemic control or blood sugar control. Now, interestingly enough, if we look at patients who had higher HbA1cs, we did a fascinating study in the UK just a couple of months ago, where we saw patients who had very poor glycemic control, and we actually intentionally picked these patients to see, you know, how would they do, the guys who are really poorly controlled. And actually the hypothesis before starting it, because we didn't know, it hadn't really been done, was if their HbA1c is really high, like up over 100, then maybe they won't drop that much because they'd have stubborn insulin resistance, the pancreas to be shot. And if their HbA1c is lower, they might reverse it easier. But bizarrely, the opposite was true, meaning the higher your HbA1c and the worse your diabetes was, the bigger a reduction you got, which was amazing because we had patients who had a HbA1c of 120, 125 and still came below 48 off medications. So they effectively reversed their type 2 diabetes in just kind of 8 to 16 weeks, even though they were completely out of control. So here's a couple of our case studies, and actually I have more case studies. This is in the Portsmouth News, I think. If anyone is interested in the publication, I think it's going on ATV as well in a couple of weeks. Our study has been featured there, which is, when I say our study, it's the program that we run, the program that I'll tell you about later on, which was done as a study in the UK. It's exactly the same thing, me coaching these patients. So this is Brian, and I picked Brian as a case study because his blood pressure dropped so much. So he went from 103 kgs to 94, which is about close to 10 kgs weight loss, about 22 pounds. His HbA1c was just gone into diabetic and he came down to normal. His blood pressure was 163 over 84, went down to 129 over 68. No longer takes medication. Next one up is my friend Nikki, and Nikki was one of my favorite patients to work with because actually she got quite emotional a couple of times and got upset as she was telling me how much her mental health had improved, which is lovely because that's the sort of stuff I get excited about. It's funny, when I first started doing this line of work about 15, 16 years ago, patients would say to me, you know, I lost 3 stone or I lost 7 stone, and I'd say, oh, that's great. Yeah, and you know, I'd be happy for them, but it's not the sort of stuff that moves you. What really moves me is people saying their mental health has got a lot better, the fatty liver has gone, they've reversed their diabetes. And even reversing diabetes, we hear it so often now, it's not something we're shocked by anymore. You know, I just send a message to the guys I work with and say, another patient reversed. It's kind of expected at this stage. So Nikki's HbA1c went from 93 to 55. Her ALT, which is her liver function, went from 63, it should be below 40, down to 17, a 73% reduction in about 16 weeks. And her triglycerides, which are fats in the liver, went from 8.2, which is through the roof, down to 3.2, so very nearly in the normal section now. And like I say, her mental health improved hugely. And this is another one on liver function. If anyone has told you you have a fatty liver or kind of a fatty liver, it's because of type 2 diabetes. And they often treat them as separate things, which is remarkable actually, because if you look at the physiology, they are one of the same thing. It's the insulin resistance, again, the same thing I'm talking about, where the pancreas struggles to deal with sugar, that causes high blood pressure, causes weight around the midsection, low energy levels up and down, the inability to lose weight. Until you treat that, you can't get anywhere with type 2 diabetes. So his fatty liver almost gone. By the end of it, his ALT halved, his GGT, these are just markers of liver function, stands for gamma glutamate transferase, and ALT is alanine transaminase. I can never pronounce those. Went from 82 to 43, so a 50% reduction, and his liver function, again, another nearly 50% reduction. He went from poorly controlled diabetic at 86 on insulin, GLP-1s, metformin, off all his medications, and his HbA1c is halved. He's technically no longer diabetic, so his diabetes is in remission. And I want to make this point. These are not standout case studies. They're just interesting case studies. This is what we expect to see. So when a patient starts with me, I always say, and some people think I'm very bold, but I mean it. I always say I will absolutely get your diabetes into remission. I'll get your HbA1c down below 48 and get you reducing, if not off, all your medications. Because it's a given. We've done this for 7 years and built a huge expertise in metabolic health. And this is what our doctors think. So this is the doctor actually who was over the 3 patients in the UK. There was about 40 patients in that group, but he reckons it's the most rewarding thing he's done in his entire career is working with us to reverse diabetes for patients. So rather than prescribing more and more medications and going, oh, I'll put you on Ozempic now, and then the Ozempic doesn't suit you, I'll put you on Victoza and I'll double your metformin. Rather than doing that, he said, you know what, let's work with this group. Who we initially met on about 1.5 years, 2 years ago. And I really like what they're doing and the publications they're doing, and let's see what happens. And that's what he felt about it. And we have our own doctors as well on our board of advisors. We've our consulting cardiologist, Dr. Niall Caldwell, up in Clonmel as well, who's a brilliant guy altogether. So let's explain how type 2 diabetes happens, and then you'll understand why we take this approach in reversing it. So essentially what happens with type 2 diabetes is when you eat any food, that food has to be carbohydrate, protein, and fat. Now, protein and fat have little effect on the pancreas in the sense that they don't give you high blood sugar levels. Fat, for example, barely budges your blood sugar levels. It's broken down into what are known as ketones. Protein is broken down into amino acids, building blocks for cellular growth and muscular growth. It's not really used for fuel, so that doesn't really spike your blood sugar levels much. It has a slightly kind of a pulsatile effect on your blood sugars. And then we have carbs. Now, carbs in and of themselves are not inherently evil. They're not necessarily just bad because, you know, they're bad for the sake of being bad. Carbs are fine if you're talking about strawberries, raspberries, most vegetables, with the exception of potatoes and a few others. I'm talking about refined carbohydrates. If you're eating things like breakfast cereals and porridge and Weetabix and breads, there's no way, absolutely no way you're going to reverse your diabetes, because your blood sugar levels are going to trend much higher after those foods. So refined carbohydrates, or high amounts of dietary carbohydrate, boils down to sugar in the blood. So, excuse me, I'm all blocked up. So this is the point that I want to get across, and it's hugely important. All dietary carbohydrate is metabolized as blood glucose, meaning if you eat a big bowl of cornflakes and it says only 1 gram or only half a teaspoon of sugar, it's not. It's about 21 spoons of sugar by the time it boils down. And the biochemists and the physiologists and nutritional scientists who are putting these labels together know that only too well. If I'm sitting here in Ballincollig and Cork, and I know that. So it's just clever marketing. So sometimes patients will say to me, I had a patient who said last week or the week before, I hope you're not on the call because I'm not giving out, it's just I think people can learn from it, who said to me that every time I eat muesli, my sugar levels go up to 12. And I said, yeah, as in I kind of expected that. And they said, yeah, but it's sugar-free. There's no sugar in it. And this person was eating about 100 grams of muesli, which is normal. It's a big enough bowl, but it's normal. And because it was labeled as no sugar or sugar-free, they thought, well, there's no sugar in it. But again, all dietary carbohydrate, all 100 grams of that carbohydrate boils down to sugar. So if you take that 100 grams, if you divide that by 4, you get roughly spoons of sugar in your blood after you eat it. Very roughly, but that's just a very kind of reductionist way of looking at it. So she was consuming the equivalent of kind of 24, 25 spoons of sugar in her blood, and then puzzled as to why her sugar levels are going up. And in fairness to her, how was she to know? It was marked as sugar-free, so she thought, well, that'll do me, I'm diabetic. So all dietary carbohydrate is metabolized as sugar. Now, what happens is if you have a genetic predisposition for having type 2 diabetes, if it's in the family, if you're naturally insulin resistant, you naturally gain a bit of weight easily, your pancreas is kind of delicate and it doesn't need all of that glucose coming in. Every time glucose comes in, the pancreas has to secrete a hormone called insulin to lower your blood sugar levels. If it keeps doing that over time, what happens is it breaks. So basically what it does, and this is kind of confusing to some people because it's strange the way it happens, is if you imagine somebody in a car and they're revving the car, say that's making insulin, and they keep revving so much that the accelerator breaks, but instead of going backwards, it goes forwards and slams to the floor. The pancreas does the same. It makes so much insulin, but the body just says, you know what, there's too much insulin around. I'm not going to use it. I don't know how to use it. So it's kind of like a white noise. It stops responding to the signal. So insulin levels are through the roof, yet ironically, your body can't use insulin. And when you check the insulin levels in someone who's just diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, they're usually 10 or even 15 times the amount that they'd be in a non-diabetic person. So the high insulin, when it's left untreated, and even when it's treated, leads to high blood pressure, high cholesterol, sleep apnea, PCOS, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, dementia, cancers, all of those things. Okay, so how do we get the blood sugar levels under control? We take a very simple approach. We know physiologically type 2 diabetes is carbohydrate intolerant, so we must pull back on refined carbohydrates, things like the cereals and granola bars and scones. And there's other foods that you wouldn't think are high carb and are very high carb. And we replace those foods with real sources of protein and fat: meat, eggs, cheese, Greek yogurt, all that sort of stuff. And you see a pretty dramatic reduction in your blood sugar levels. So this is just an example of how not to start your day. So, we're told that cornflakes are grand because they're, I don't know, low calorie or whatever way the clever marketing says on the side of the box. And that's awful, terribly processed food. If a box of cornflakes has 30, 40 ingredients on the side of it, your evolutionary body hasn't had a chance to keep up with that or know what to do with it. It hasn't got a hope of dealing with that. And like I always say when I'm doing seminars like this, if you can't pronounce it, what hope has your digestive system got of dealing with it appropriately? It just has absolutely none at all. So the truth here is that the bowl of cornflakes will leave you with roughly 21 spoons of sugar in your blood, which is kind of scary. And I say in my 90-gram serving because that's roughly what I take or used to take when I ate cereal 8 or 9 years ago. So you're left with around 20, 21 spoons of sugar in the blood. And I want to be really clear about this because as a health scientist, I always want to back stuff up with research and references. If someone says to you, no, there's not that much sugar, I read the side of the box, it's not that there's that much sucrose, as in table sugar, in it. It's that by the time the cornflakes boil down in your blood, when they're metabolized, it's the equivalent of eating 21 spoons of sugar. Because again, and I know I keep saying this, all dietary carbohydrate is metabolized as blood glucose. And it's the same with all these different foods. So you'll see this with basmati rice, potatoes, French fries, spaghetti, even things like bananas and tropical fruits. They're particularly bad, actually. But when we know what foods are good, like chicken, fish, almonds, mushroom, cheese, dark chocolate, Greek yogurt, meats, eggs, all those sorts of things, when we know that they will leave you with 0 spoons of sugar in your blood, it's actually relatively straightforward to reverse the diabetes when you know exactly what to eat. Now, we spent the last 7 years tracking exactly what patients eat and their blood sugar levels at the end of the 16 weeks, so we know exactly what you need to eat to reverse your diabetes. But this just gives you an idea of foods that you wouldn't expect. Now, 150 grams is not a big serving size of basmati rice, and it's the same for brown rice. It's only about a spoon of sugar left and whole grain and all that, the stuff that we thought was great. So all of those foods, again, all carbohydrate convert to sugar in the blood. Okay, and this one shocks people actually. This is just breakfast cereals. So if you take a look here, 60 grams, by the way, is a tiny bowl. It's a half a bowl for me anyway. So a bowl of Cocoa Pops will leave you with about 14 spoons of sugar in your blood, 14 and a half. Cornflakes will leave you with about 16 or 17 spoons of sugar in your blood. Instant oats will leave you with roughly the same amount of sugar in your blood. So if you think you're doing right by eating porridge instead of breakfast cereal, you're probably improving about 10%, and you see that in your blood sugar levels, they still be high. But if you swap that out, one of the foods that we prescribe to our patients, like, I don't know, eggs and avocado, or there's loads of different examples. You get all those in the meal plans. You're talking about 0 spoons of sugar in your blood, which is why we need to get patients to liaise with their doctors and come off medications pretty soon after starting, especially insulin. So our protocol around insulin is to reduce your insulin by 50% under the guidance of your doctor, because otherwise you're going to go too low, because the food has that much of an effect on your blood sugar levels. So this is what we do for patients. So we run what's known as the digital therapeutic, which is, I run it. So anyone who signs up to the program will be working with me. So it's for weight loss, pre and type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure and high cholesterol. Also for sleep apnea, PCOS, low energy levels, all that sort of stuff. All of those things get dramatically better. And your appetite reduces like crazy, like anyone who tell you, anyone who's on the program will tell you. It's not difficult. You just eat different foods, and they're not the sort of foods you'd expect. They're actually really nice foods. And that gets your blood sugar levels well under control. So what we do is we put people on a clinically proven program, which is a program I designed over the last 6 or 7 years with my colleagues, that has meal plans, shopping lists, food guides, educational videos. You can look at the videos on your phone. We send you out a resource pack, which looks like this one, if you can still see me on the camera. It'll be around there somewhere. And then we can track your blood sugar levels then. So when you check your bloods, we can see it on a graph on our screen. And we can advise you accordingly, or during each week whenever in our review sessions. So what we usually do is weeks 1, 2, 4, and every month thereafter, we do a Zoom call just to make sure everything is on site. But even if we don't do a Zoom call or somebody misses a Zoom call, they can book one at a day's notice and say, can I jump in for a call next week or tomorrow, or can we book a Zoom for tomorrow and review things? So there's full-time support there. And I always say to people, take my mobile number. If you have a question, text me or give me a call. And at any stage, including over the weekend while you're on the program for 16 weeks. And again, excuse me, the foods are not difficult to follow at all. It's not hard. It's not, there's no restriction, any of that sort of stuff. It's just, there's no calorie counting either. There's none of those silly shakes or protein bars or any of that nonsense that, companies try and upsell you, like, I don't know, let's use a fake name, Skinny World, where they say to you, you have to eat our special protein bar that helps you lose weight. That's all silly stuff. We're very straight up and honest, clinically proven. We don't upsell people or do any of those protein bars or that sort of stuff. So it's just simple, real food that doesn't spike your blood sugar levels. If anyone is interested, I'll come to the breakdown of cost there in a second, but we've just won a couple of major awards for our work on diabetes. One is the International Scholar Award I was telling you about, just 2020, just gone, and the overall winner of Excellence in General Practice Award for people working with doctors in 2021. This is our team. So I'm the clinical lead. We have a couple of nutritionists. My wife is a PCOS specialist, Natalie. Dr. Niall Caldwell is our consultant cardiologist and clinical advisor who oversees a lot of the clinical stuff with myself. If anyone is interested, we have literally one place left. Now, I always have to say this when I'm on a webinar. I do my webinar from 7:30 to 8, and I always say to my wife, just let me work on till 9 o'clock, even though she kills me because the kids are going to bed, because the phone is usually hopping. There's about 70 people on the call, so I suspect there'll be 4 or 5 people ringing afterwards. If anyone wants the last place, just text me and let me know. The price, by the way, is €499 or 3 payments of 185. That's everything, all included. So you can pay 185 when you start and every month thereafter, and that covers, or the 499, which works out a bit cheaper. And that covers you for the 16 weeks, unlimited Zoom consultations, 24/7 coach support. We send you meal plans, shopping lists, food guides, monitor your blood sugar levels. It's everything you need to put your diabetes into remission. We've just one space left for October, so I might take another one. I might do 2 patients. It's fairly busy at the minute. But if anyone does want to do that, my mobile number is there. That's my personal number. It's an easy one to remember. It's 086 086 1300. So you can either ring me. My phone will be on till 9 o'clock, 9:30 tonight till the kids are gone into bed. Or you can send me a text message and ask me to hold the place. If you do ring and I'm on another call, I will call you back and I'll hold the place for someone until the places are gone. But like I said, there's 1, maybe 2 spaces left. I'm waiting to confirm someone tomorrow as well. So that's me. I'm going to take some questions as well, guys. I'll get through as many as I can because there's a fair few questions in. And let me see. I have retinopathy and sores on my feet from diabetes. Will this get worse or can I reverse these conditions? You can absolutely reverse those conditions. So the sores on your feet, actually, when I bring up, no, I won't bring up the case study because I'm not sure if I have permission to share it, but we do have a case study of a guy recently who had sores on his feet and he was going in and getting them checked twice a week or 3 times a week with his GP in his PCN. Sorry, with his doctor. I call them PCNs because we work in the UK as well. Primary Care Network is all that means. And I won't say his name, but he used to go in, let's call him John, he used to go in 2 or 3 times a week to get his bandages changed. And within 4 weeks, his ulcers were all gone. Because the ulcers, the retinopathy, the kidney damage, the amputations, they're caused by high blood sugar levels bounding around, bouncing off the small, delicate blood vessels. So you'll notice wherever the blood vessel damage is, it's tingling and damage to the toes, the small blood vessels in the feet and the calves, the fingers sometimes, the eyes, the kidneys, the penis in males, the ovaries in females. It's all places where there's small blood vessels, and that stops. Am I okay to have a treat now and again when I'm in remission? Yes, you are. Yeah. So when you're in remission, what will happen is your pancreas gets a break for the 3 or 4 months that you're doing the program, and it initiates what's known, this is a little bit sciencey, but it initiates what's known as the first phase insulin response in the pancreas, meaning that it starts working again. Okay, so yes, you can go back to having those sort of things. The doctor has given me 3 months to get my diabetes under control before medication, but I don't know where to start. Well, you can give me a buzz and I'll sort that out for you. Yeah, I know, and it can be overwhelming because it takes a while to get the get your head around. You know, it's so funny. When I first started this way of eating, I just thought, someone said to me, all you have to do is avoid bread, rice, potatoes, and cereal. And I thought, well, that's everything I eat. That's my whole diet. So what am I going to do? My husband has high potassium levels and cannot have tomatoes or mushrooms. So many recipes have them. Yeah, true. So if you can't have tomatoes or mushrooms because of potassium, you just don't have tomatoes or mushrooms. So there are no foods that you must eat to reverse diabetes. There are only foods that you should omit from the diet or leave out. So by all means, I think that's, yeah, I won't say surname, but I think that's Mike. Yeah, it is Michael. That's fine. Just tell Mike, tomatoes or mushrooms, just avoid them. There's no panic at all. Just swap them out for foods that you can eat if potassium is high. Lisa, I've just been diagnosed and I'm keen to reverse the condition. Your research says you have a 48% success rate. Is that correct? Yes. So we have a 48% success rate had back in 2017, and in a more recent study we had a 72% reversal rate. The reason it's only 48%, Linda, or 72% is 2 things. First of all, not everyone complies with the program. Some people will just drop off and just something will come up and they feel like it's more important. And the other thing is that some people who start off with a HbA1c of 120 might come down to like 55, which is technically not diabetic remission. So the 48% is not a success rate. There's a way higher success rate. It's close to 100%. It's a reversal rate. So if you start up really, really high, like Nikki, for example, had a HbA1c there of 96 and it came down to 52 or something like that. But 4 or 5 weeks later, she would have been in remission. Okay, and I'll just take 1, maybe 2 more questions there. Let me just see what it's have in here. I'm on metformin for 2 years. Why is my doctor putting me on insulin? I thought metformin would make me better. Yeah, it doesn't. So the metformin will lower your blood sugar levels a little bit, but if you keep eating the same sort of diet, it's a matter of time before you end up on insulin. I mean, that's the trajectory. You start on metformin, you end up with Victoza or Ozempic or any of those once weekly injections into the stomach. That doesn't control things because the root cause of diabetes is diet and your sensitivity to carbohydrates. And then eventually you end up on insulin. That's just the typical trajectory. Will his potassium come down with the diet, leaving out those foods? Michael, yes, it should. And actually his potassium should balance off because there's an antagonistic response or reaction between insulin and potassium. So when his insulin comes down from eating a lower carb diet, his potassium should balance out as well. That would be fairly often that we see that. Okay, guys, I have a couple of texts to get back to. If somebody wants to hold the place for the program, please just let me know after the call within the next kind of hour or 2, because I'd imagine that the last place or 2 will be gone. Thanks so much for your time. If you want to put your diabetes into remission, I'd love to work with you. Be working with me. I'm a health scientist with 7 publications in international journals, and again, international award-winning scholars. Myself and my team, not just me. Thanks so much for joining this evening. I appreciate your time, guys. I appreciate all of you tuning in, and we'll see you all soon. By the way, my mobile number is up there if anyone wants to give me a buzz or give me a text. It's an easy one to remember: 086 086 1300. Thanks, everyone, and I'll see you all soon. Take care. Bye-bye.